because this Taurus new moon incorporates Lilith, that I should come to you guys with a responsible talk on the dark-sided nature of Taurus. And if you're new here to Eye of Karina TV, then you may not know that the way that we do things around here is a little bit against the grain of classic astrology. And so the first thing that I want to let you know is that I'm not going to talk about Taurus being possessive. This actually is a mixed up connotation that happens a lot with Taurus and the dark-sidedness of Taurus being possessive, but that actually belongs to Scorpio, Taurus's opposite zodiac sign. Scorpio is the one that uses possessions in a way that becomes dark-sided. Taurus being the sign of possessions, right? The sign of owning things. How could possessions be their dark side when it is actually what they rule over and what the entire sign is about? So I really want to dispel that idea of Taurus's possession or possessive nature being a dark-sided part of their nature. Okay. And I'm going to talk to you guys about the real dark-sided toxic traits of a Taurus. And I'm exposing myself because your girl has a sun in Taurus. She has um, a Mars in Taurus, North Node in Taurus. I've got not mean Lilith, but true Lilith in Taurus. So I'm not here bad mouthing all the Tauruses. And in fact, if you work with me and understand the way that I do things, you're all the signs when you come over to this channel. So yeah, let's talk about first why Taurus's dark-sided nature is not being possessive right quick. Because a lot of people mess this up and then they wonder why they have issues. And actually what ends up happening, and the reason that they have issues is because everyone is all the signs, right? And everyone has Taurus somewhere in their chart. And if they actually see being possessive, where Taurus is in your chart as a dark-sided nature, you're going to lose the entire essence of Taurus, and then you're going to actually become toxic. Because one of the dark-sided natures of Taurus is not being possessive. Okay, and I'm going to talk to you guys about that. So let's talk about possessions and why in Taurus it's so important. Like I said, Taurus is a sign that rules over possessing things and the things that you own. Where you go to look at Taurus in your chart, or the second house, which is Taurus's ruling house, we find here that these are things that we buy. These are things that we own. Okay, and so the idea of possessions when it comes to the zodiac sign of Taurus is ownership. Okay. And I've talked about this before because ownership happens with objects, but it also happens with people. And a lot of people run away and shy away from this. And this is probably why we have so much commitment issues and loyalty issues in a lot of, sectors of society, because nobody wants to be owned. But when we look at Taurus and where it lands in the seasons, it's in the early seasons, it's in spring. It's a part of the baby energy. It's a part of the youthful energy. Taurus is a youthful energy. So when we look at the idea of possessions and ownership, you got to look at, and specifically ownership over people. Think about owning children, owning babies, okay? Because you have ownership and responsibility to children, right? And this actually throws people off because they think that it stays with children and it doesn't happen in real life. And then you wonder why, when you have a certain situation with another person, why you are struggling with committing because you're not taking ownership. You're struggling with responsibility because you're not taking ownership. You struggle with accountability because you're not taking ownership. You know what I'm saying? And the people find you to be wavering, right? So if Taurus is not strong in your chart, especially on the concept of ownership and possessions, and specifically possessions over people, if it's not strong, what ends up happening is that you seem flimsy. You don't seem secure. You don't seem sure of yourself. And you don't seem trustworthy, because this axis of Taurus and Scorpio is all about trust. So possessions over people has a bad connotation right now in society. But when you look at Taurus, it's a necessary factor, because you have to possess and own your your things. You have to take ownership for them. You have to make sure that they're cared for. You have to make sure that they stay in pristine shape. You have to make sure that they are still useful, that they're still working at their best capacity. And this doesn't just go for objects, but it goes for people. Like I said, Taurus is in the baby season. So we often find this as parents with children, that we own them, that there are possessions, that we have to take care of them. We have to make sure that they're being treated well. Ownership and possession has a lot to do with responsibility and accountability. And this is why possessions is a positive trait of Taurus, but more of a toxic trait of Scorpio, Taurus's opposite sign. Okay. And then when you get into relationships, you want to be able to have a sense of possession with people. Not that you are controlling what people are doing, but you have a sense of ownership to people, commitment to the people you choose to have commitment to. You have a sense of ownership in having accountability. Okay. If people don't vibe with this, they have a lot of issues with appearing to be stable and secure with adults. Okay. So if you like, I see some people are coming off and on, I'm not sure why, but I know that this topic is tough for a lot of people to get. And I'm here to say it. You do not appear to look like you have stability if you don't have an idea of possession, ownership, accountability, and responsibility to the adults in your life. It's so important to understand. Okay, so with that being said, let's go into the toxic traits of Taurus to really understand this. And ooh, today has been a tough day for me. And I talked about how Lilith was a powerful time right now to deal with your shadows in the previous live, and how Lilith has a big play in the new moon this time around, which is igniting a darker nature. But you know what, you guys? I didn't take responsibility in actually talking about the darker sides, because quite often Lilith plays out to be a toxic and darker energy because we as humans are not good with dealing with our trauma and shadows. And only if you have done that kind of work can you use Lilith at her best ability. If you haven't done, that kind of dark work, even touched on it a little bit, then Lilith only becomes reactionary, triggering, and toxic. And so I didn't take ownership and possession over you all and being responsible to you in the last live and talking about the dangers of Lilith before I talked about the benefits of Lilith. Now, this new moon has evoked a lot of things, and today it's been exciting, but I also had a lot of reactionary energy, and I actually really see how Lilith first works and tests you on the lower nature. She tests you through the toxic traits of that zodiac sign. So let's talk about Taurus, because now we can really dive into what are the true toxic traits of Taurus. Well, I told you that Taurus is a sign of possessions and a sign of, and what that means is that you own your stuff, you're accountable, and you're responsible. So what ends up happening is that a toxic version of a Taurus is somebody who is not possessive. Okay, it's a person that's not possessive, that doesn't take ownership, that doesn't take accountability, doesn't take responsibility. So what ends up happening is they appear to be unstable, right? They also appear to constantly gaslight or look like they are not able to admit when they're wrong. They're not able to admit, not necessarily when they're wrong, but admit where they played a part in certain things. So lack of accountability creates a lot of victim issues. It creates a lot of um, roles that you can play that doesn't leave you in the place of empowerment, and definitely not a place of security, and definitely not a place of making money. So one of the toxic traits is not accountability. One of the toxic traits of Taurus is not taking care of your stuff, not taking care of the things that you buy and putting them in a nice place and making sure that they're well kept and making sure that they're organized. These are toxic traits of Taurus. Okay. And the same thing goes for people. This is why I have to stress why Taurus is healthy when Taurus is possessive of people. The reason that people don't like it is because a lot of people have commitment issues. And a lot of people are scared of that kind of loyalty because society pushes, this idea of independence and not being controlled. But there's a whole aspect of relationships that requires you to be responsible. So a toxic trait of a Taurus is not just not taking care of things, but not taking care of your people, not being accountable when you need to be, not saying I will be there. You're saying I will be there and you're not there. You're saying that you will do certain things and you don't do them. You don't take accountability. You don't take responsibility because you're not seeing your ownership in the parts that you play. That's a toxic trait of Taurus. Okay, because Taurus needs to be loyal and own things so that they have the ability to see things through. It's a whole different nature when we look at Taurus's opposite sign, Scorpio, in which things start to become power plays and people start to possess people due to those issues. But in a lot of ways, you want to be owned in the nature and the energy of Taurus. You want to be owned because in a relationship, you want somebody to come halfway with the parts that they play. And if they do not, then they are unstable. They're not a secure relationship for you to be in. Whenever we look at the Venus rule signs, we're looking at the value of relationships. And when we look at Taurus, the value that a Taurus energy brings is the loyalty and the commitment to make sure that they take care, that they upgrade the quality, that they appreciate. And these all happen through the human connection of ownership. So another toxic trait that often happens with Taurus is being argumentative. This is way more of a toxic trait than what a lot of people will say when it comes to Taurus being possessive. The reason that Taurus becomes argumentative and it becomes a toxic trait is because Taurus is a self-absorbed sign and it's one of the darker sides of Taurus. Okay, so if you look at Aries, Taurus comes right after Aries, and Aries is I am, and Taurus is I have. So what ends up happening is that Taurus is still the younger version of Venus. And so this becomes this this idea of a child, that a child has things and doesn't want to share things, right? This idea of the world kind of still serves me and revolves around me. That's more of the toxic trait of Taurus than calling Taurus possessive. Okay, because a person who sees is very self-absorbed cannot see the ownership that they need to take. So they lose all of the traits of Taurus when they become too self-absorbed, and this can happen. And because a person is self-absorbed under Taurus energy, when it's time to have a conversation, they can be argumentative. Why? Because they're not having a conversation on a two-way level. They're only having a conversation really with themselves and about themselves and almost don't need the other person's input as much as they just need the other person there. That is way more of a toxic trait that happens with Taurus energy that people don't talk about. So we've talked about the fact that toxic Taurus is non-possessive. Toxic Taurus is argumentative. And then finally, toxic Taurus can either be too intellectualized, right, in the need for perfection, as Virgo is in Taurus's fifth house, which Taurus has an enjoyment out of perfecting things. But it also is a deep superficiality, okay? Superficiality on probably even more of a basis than the Libra, Taurus's sister sign, because they're both ruled by Venus. The superficiality comes with thinking that and making that be like the item, the possession that is going to make them feel more like they are important. For example, buying a expensive um, pair of sneakers. Okay, because this starts to happen, this starts to ignite the fixed cross, right? And so Taurus brings money to the fixed cross as its way of participating. What ends up happening is Aquarius starts to play a big role, as Aquarius is social status. So if you have money, you have social status, right? And if you have money, you have power, which is Scorpio. And if you have money, you're going to be seen more, which is Leo, right? You can be more flashy with it. So when Taurus starts, one of the toxic traits of Taurus is actually not understanding what is of quality and what is true richness or true values, right? And thinking that something is expensive, and that makes it a quality thing. Things that are difficult, trying to get the prize. This is something that I really want to consider, because if we look at this idea of getting the prize or getting something that is, considered a high priced thing or name brand thing, it's a part of Taurus's nature. But what ends up happening is the inability to differentiate what is truly of value and what isn't. So you can have an item that cost $5 to make. You can have an item that costs $5 to make. In fact, if you shop on these sites like Fashion Nova and Pretty Little Thing, I'm not judging because I shop in them too. But I shop in them knowing that I could always go to AliExpress and get it for like 75% less. So I'm shopping it, and it's toxic as hell because I know that I could get it for a better price as a tourist. But my point in this is that some of these like clothes on these sites like Fashion Nova, they cost $3, $4, $5 to make. And then the site itself will bring up the price clearly to make a profit, but they bring up the price all the way to $20, 25, 30, $35. I'm not trying to put Fashion Nova on blast. There so many companies do this, and I'm not trying to hurt anybody's ability to make money. But the point and the example of this is to show that, is that garment of high quality just because the person who's selling it wanted to make money? Because the garment itself costs $3 or $4 or $5. And you could always go to AliExpress in China and have them ship it to you from China versus going to Fashion Nova and getting it. That happens a lot. You'll see a lot of items Fashion Nova on AliExpress. So the point is it true quality? Is it truly something of high value just because it has a high price on it? And so this idea of the prize, right? Having a prize or a treasure, but specifically the word prize I wanted to use because I feel like it's a good example of when Taurus is toxic about high quality stuff and prices. Because the word prize means that it takes difficulty to get to it. You have to work hard to get to it, okay? And that is not a nature of Venus or Taurus energy. The whole idea here of Venus and Taurus is that it's going to be attracting, it's going to be natural, it's going to be so, rich, being rich and being of high value and making things become even higher of a value is the beautiful traits of Taurus. But what ends up happening that twists it is judging certain things because of superficiality, judging things because it's what's in society right now to look this way or to act this way. So a toxic Taurus, and especially Lilith and Taurus, this is where we get the pretty privilege, the pretty privilege of looking and acting and being a certain way due to how you look, and being able to buy and get certain things based off of what society deems as valuable. So Taurus takes all of its energy out of itself and puts it onto the fixed cross, and it lets Aquarius and Scorpio take over, right? Aquarius will use it and say, this beauty needs to fit my society social standards. Scorpio will say, well, this thing that I am valuing also I can use for power plays, right? So I can use this to get more of what I want, to manipulate people because of it, right? So it's a little complicated, but the whole idea here is recognizing true value, which becomes a toxic trait of Taurus when you're unable to do so, when you're clouded by society standards, when you're clouded by power moves, when you're clouded by trying to be accepted. You'll fall into the state of superficiality, and you'll think that a garment that costs $5 to make is really worth 45. So those are the three ways that I'd like to break down the toxic traits of Taurus. This is me coming back and taking ownership because on my channel I talk a lot about Lilith, but I don't always take the responsibility to talk about how Lilith's energy starts very low vibrational. And it's important for me to come and possess, you know, be possessive over my shit, over my channel, and take ownership and accountability to the people that watch my channel and say that Lilith is not an easy energy to fuck around with. This new moon in Taurus has got Lilith written all over it. If you guys have already heard about the gas situations and even in your personal lives, the potential for money is there, and the potential to make money and to play the game of money is there. The reason I say it's to play the game of money because Uranus is in Taurus. And even though Uranus isn't close to the new moon energy, Uranus is still in Taurus, still feeding that energy. And Uranus is a game player. So this is about money games right now. You guys will see cryptocurrency is becoming a big topic. The gas issue is becoming a topic. This is because we've got new moon with Lilith in Taurus. And Lilith is going to first start low vibrational. What's really beautiful is the possibility of what true richness, true quality, true concepts of possessions over things and people, and really bringing that to a higher place, really seeing it as something that's important. Quite often we run from being controlled. And when you run from being controlled, you might actually realize that you're running away from everything that you want, which is somebody or something that is going to appreciate you, bring up your value, be loyal to you, and treat you as they own you, as they are an owner of you, in the sense that they care about you and they want to see what's best for you. Not that they're controlling you, because possession, being possessive in a controlling way, is a toxic trait of Scorpio. It's not a toxic trait of Taurus. Okay, do you think Lilith is meaningful in your chart or plays a major role in astrology? Yes, I think Lilith is very meaningful and it plays a major role in astrology. I think that just like how the world has been dominated by masculinity in the sense that we mainly focus on light, we don't want to focus much on dark. And Lilith is the dark side of the moon. It's the darkest of the dark. So it can scare people off. People have bad religious connotations to Lilith. Lilith is low vibrational energy, so people don't always want to talk about it or deal with it. But it's through Lilith that you really find that space of inadequacy, that space of shadows, of shame, that thing that you can't put on, but it's always getting to you. It's always triggering you. It's always making you feel like you don't belong. This is why Lilith plays the part that she plays and why it's important to look at Lilith. Now, certain charts may not have a dominant Lilith, but you should still look at it. And if you have a dominant Lilith, it's probably because she's being aspected by another planet, or she's in a strong house, right? Or she's conjunct, trine, sextile, square, or opposite another planet, something like that, which would really make her dominant. Um, Lilith is a beast, exactly. Perfect Escape says, I have Lilith and Leo. What does that mean during this new moon? Well, I would definitely first recommend to check out my Lilith series because I have a Lilith and Leo video. But depending on where the degrees is of your Lilith, depending on if you're talking about your true Lilith or your mean Lilith, your average Lilith. But the whole thing about Leo is that Leo is on the fixed axis, right? So if you have Lilith and Leo and there's a new moon in Taurus, and that Lilith and Leo is somewhere near the degrees where the new moon is, you are having a square to the new moon in which there's a lot more challenge that might be occurring to you, but it may be subtle, it may be subliminal. The other thing is that if your Lilith is really like around 20 degrees in Leo, that means it also is squaring the current Lilith in Taurus, which means that you might be really not seeing certain people that are embodying that superficiality, that not wanting to take ownership, not wanting to take accountability. People who are just arguing at you, but they're just like talking at you, but they're not fessing up to their part in it. This is why I'm stressing that. I said this probably 5 times. Taurus's nature to be possessive is an important trait to have in Taurus. It becomes twisted in Scorpio because you want people to take ownership for the parts that they play. And that comes from Taurus's loyalty and sense of ownership and possession. Okay, cool. Oh, interesting. Lavender says my natal Lilith is in Pisces. Beautiful. So your Lilith in Pisces might actually be experiencing beautiful things, especially depending on the degree it's at, as Pisces and Taurus do sextile with each other. So maybe you didn't have as difficult of a emotional day as I did, being that I have Mars in Taurus right next to this new moon of Lilith. And as a Pisces Lilith, you may have been fed more inspiration, more creation. The only thing is you may be dealing with somebody who embodies argumentativeness, embodies, being self-absorbed in their own shit. You know what I'm saying? But you have so much power with Lilith and Pisces, sextiling Taurus, to be able to offset that. Remember, Pisces is way more sophisticated, way more wise than Taurus energy. Okay, so you can use your Lilith as long as you're dealing with your shadows. You can use your Lilith to help be more creative, to open up the doors of compassion, and you be the example of being the one to take accountability and ownership in whatever part you play in your relationships. Lavender says she just had to fill out with the Taurus sun. Yo, yeah. Okay, so your Lilith in Pisces was dealing with a toxic Taurus energy. And so, unfortunately, you had a little bit of a fallout. The new moon energy actually mirrors this. So it's like you're in the weather. And I would just say, again, with your Lilith and Pisces, with this new moon in Taurus, you have way more wisdom, way more compassion. And the only reason that you wouldn't do it is because your Lilith and Pisces is unwilling to bend and wants to remain in its lower nature. And there's nothing, it's just about knowing what choices that you have. You probably end up being the bigger person if you chose to do so in that situation. So thank you guys for tuning into this. I feel so passionately about this topic, especially about Taurus and the idea of possessions. Nobody, no astrologer ever I've ever come across, the most prestigious astrologers, have ever talked about Taurus's need to possess and why. And it's the reason that Taurus is the sign of money, is it rules over possessions and taking care of this, because that's how money works as well. In a lot of ways, when we look at income in the second house and astrology, is taking care of things, appreciating things, bringing more value to things. And that requires you being an owner of these things, whether they're things or people. Okay, so thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next live. Peace and love.